get on
Hey,
our way.
yeah,
Uh,
oh, sorry.
my name is Danielle Deptuck, and I'm the support facilitator at the Self-Management Program of Southeastern Ontario. We'd like to welcome you all to our third of our series of Lunch and Learn webinars for healthcare professionals as part of our efforts to build various communities of practice in the region. So I just have a few housekeeping pieces to mention before we begin. So as you will notice, at the moment, you're all currently muted. In just a moment, I will unmute everybody. So if someone is on the phone but for some reason can't access the webinar piece, you could speak up at that time to let me know, and I'll take down your contact information, and we can troubleshoot offline. Then before beginning again, I will mute everyone so that we don't hear any background noise. But if ever you have any issues during the webinar itself, please get my attention by virtually raising your hand. So there should be a little icon that you can see in your little console with a little hand. You click on that, and that will get my attention. Or you can type in the chat box, and that will get my attention as well. So I'm just about to unmute everyone. So right now, does anybody have any technical issues that they need to let me know? So at the moment, I'm seeing Ruth, Nancy, and Krista online. So hopefully
And
you guys.
I'm here now. It's Tina.
Okay, perfect, Tina. So does anybody need to let me know of any issues? If you're online but can't get onto the webinar, now's the time to let me know. Okay, and if you're on the phone for some reason and unable to connect to the online webinar or to speak up at this time, please let me know by emailing me at the selfmanagement@kchc.ca email. That should have been in all of your reminders. So that's selfmanagement@kchc.ca. So at this point, I'm going to remute everybody then. And I just also wanted to let everybody know that we will answer questions at the end. But please feel free to type them into the chat box if you think you're worried that you might forget them later on, and then I can address them at that point when we're at the end. I'll read them out loud and unmute the person or everyone here so that we can have that discussion while it's being answered. If you would like a printout of the slides with spaces for taking notes that will be used, it can be downloaded from our website, and the direct link was provided in your reminder emails as well. So now I would like to present our speaker for our third webinar for the chronic illness and family. Her name is Tina Kinmund, and she's an early years specialist working at the Family Space for Belleville. She has been a social worker for over 16 years with working with children and families. So now normally I would pass the screen on to Tina, but we're having some technical issues. So I am going to show her PowerPoint from my screen, and she's going to talk to us over the phone. So unfortunately, you will have to put up with her telling me to switch slides as we go along, but we'll have to make do as we can with technical issues as they come up. So you should see my screen in just a moment. So hopefully everybody's seeing my screen, and I'm just going to turn it into a slideshow, and then Tina can take over verbally for that. Okay, so it's all yours, Tina, and just let me know when you need me to click next.
Perfect. Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to this webinar, and thank you for tuning in. Today we are going to talk about the impact of chronic illness on family. As was said, I've been in the field for over 16 years working with children and family with different issues and problems, and one of them being families that are dealing with illness. So I thought it would be great to talk to everybody about what are the implications and impacts of chronic illness and the family. So the aim of my presentation is to outline the importance of families in relation to the patient with chronic illness and how best to include them in the education of self-management, because I think it's really important that we don't individualize treatment and we keep it open to the family to help them aid the self-management. Next slide. So first we want to look at some statistics. More than 9 million Canadians out there, which is 33% of the people 12 years and older, have one or more of the 7 chronic health conditions out there. One of the top ones being arthritis and the other high blood pressure. Today with modern medicine, it has increased these numbers, and therefore the families as a whole are affected. And the responsibilities of caregiving added to the routine pressures of maintaining a family and professional life, are naturally leading to a lot more stress on the family. So today we're going to look at that impact and how we can address the needs of the family as a whole. So next, what does a family look like? The definition of a family is it takes at least 2 people to make a family, and really beyond that, anything goes nowadays. So we have skip generation families. We have simple step families, complex step families, opposite sex families, same-sex families, intergenerational families, and in many cases, the families include non-biological members. So what we see is the makeup of the family is they've developed this kind of homeostasis, and it's a normal dynamic and a routine that with chronic illness can be disrupted, and then it can develop into other issues that they have to deal with. Chronic illness indeed changes a family member's roles, the responsibilities, the boundaries, and ultimately it disrupts their self-images and self-esteem, and it can result in uncertain and unpredictable futures. And this is what triggers some distressing emotions that down the line have to be dealt with. On the next slide, you're going to see a chart which lists the family life stages and family tasks. In the past, families have identified life stages, during which times specific tasks are focused of the family life. So therefore, the timing of an illness of a family member and the family's ability to respond greatly depends on where the family is in this life stage. So as an example, children of an elderly patient may have child obligations of their own, and they may live in another province, or they may not even be in a position to help out. Also, we have middle-aged parents who are ready to get out and rekindle the relationships, and they may be homebound due to an illness of a child. So depending on their life stage, things can be greatly affected within that family. We want to look a little bit at what a family role is and what that means. We need to know and understand that each family is unique. Each family as a whole is affected. Their life stage, as we said, has its own set of issues. Each family member has their own different need for either education or counseling, and everyone must alter their lifestyle and take on different roles within the family when someone is affected with chronic illness. And this may ultimately produce a disequilibrium in that family structure. And because every person in the family plays a specific role that is part of the family's everyday functioning, then the illness of one family member is disrupted. So when one family member becomes ill, other family members are going to alter their lifestyle. They're going to take on different roles and functions of that ill person, which in turn affects their life. So as another example, if a person who does most of the family's cooking and cleaning has a surgery and they can't shop or prepare meals or even clean, then other family members must step up to the plate and take on those responsibilities, in addition to what they're already doing. If a man who is the primary caregiver ends up needing some kind of intervention, they've had a heart attack, then his wife may have to return to work. They may have to become that main breadwinner. And we have to remember that this all is going to affect how that family is functioning at that time. A family kind of develops this way of dealing with issues, and when something like a chronic illness is thrown in, it will disrupt and force them to have to look at other ways of dealing with issues. So this next slide is just a somewhat humorous look at a very common theme in families dealing with the members who are chronically ill, and we hear it a lot as a joke, but it is very real and is felt in families that have members dealing with chronic illness. And it's this lack of understanding and empathy that sometimes can put an even greater strain on the relationships. If they can't understand what's going on with their family member, understand why things are happening the way they are and why they need that medicine, it can feel like a great inconvenience for them. So it's important to include families in treatment so that they have a better understanding of what their loved ones are experiencing and going through and what their needs are. So it's really important if we can get to know our patient's family, the role they play in that healthcare management piece, and in the long run, it will save a great deal of time in the long run to help them self-manage their illness. The next few slides that we're going to look at are going to show different areas of family assessment that are important to know, not necessarily important to have to go through every single step, but more or less keeping these ideas in the back of your head when dealing with your patient. Learning the answers to some or all of these questions will immensely help you develop that effective teaching-learning partnership with the patient and their family. People find it really hard to relate to those with chronic illness at times. We can all relate to acute conditions because we've maybe experienced it, but it can be really difficult to understand the life-changing effects that a chronic condition can have on a patient. So moving forward into looking at the areas of family assessment. The first thing we want to look at is, what is that family like? Who is actually considered part of the family? Who is the patient's position and role? Who is most influential? What are their occupations? Do they have any health issues themselves? And so we need to understand that as a unit, the family is the foundation. And when a family member becomes ill, we're going to, again, disrupt everything else. So knowing as much as you can about the family can help the patient better self-manage their condition then. We can help assess family style and structure just by talking with the patient or maybe observing their actions with other members. Observe who they talk about the most, who comes to visit them the most, maybe even what the reaction is to some certain members. There may be some resentment or anger issues towards some members that may need to be dealt with. The next area we need to look at is what resources are available to that family. So can the family provide for the patient's physical needs? What is the patient's home like? What neighborhood or community resources are available? What other connections does that family have, whether it be through church, community, friends, things like that? A family who knows the outside resources in their town can be much more successful in helping the patient self-manage. Long-term caregiving families have many, many needs of their own. So they need connections with resources to get their questions answered. They need to know where they can get information, where they can get support, and encouragement to carry on in what many cases is a pretty daunting task. So if we can help patients and families locate health information and evaluate it and evaluate how useful it is, then we will be able to have them in that patient teaching role much better. So if families utilize available resources to cope with and negotiate stress, then they are going to be much more adaptive and confident in the long run. We need to be able to help families with things such as if a young mother is dealing with a chronic illness, where can she go for support? What kind of parenting programs are out there? Things like going to an early years center to relieve some of the stress. For the older patients, what kind of support can we bring into the home to alleviate the stress of a family member who's giving constant care? The next thing we want to look at is, what are the family's educational background, their lifestyles, their beliefs? It affects things sometimes greatly. We need to understand what their level of education is. Do they have basic literacy skills, or are they more high functioning? Are there any language barriers? Do they have any beliefs that may contradict or add or hinder any kind of medical intervention? And does the family seem overwhelmed with anything? Most people, it'll be more effective with patient teaching if you're able to identify these families' predominant lifestyles and then find ways to sustain and incorporate these recommendations into it rather than imposing different patterns. You might come up against some major roadblocks when it comes to folk medicine, especially in our area dealing with the Aboriginals, and being able to implement what maybe they already do with what you're doing will be much easier than having them totally disregard what they believe to be an important step in the recovery. So when teaching the patient and family, it's important to identify patterns in the relationship also, and maybe be alert to the attitudes of different family members. And it's important to note that cultural specific behaviors and religious attitudes greatly influence a family's response to the chronic illness itself. Next, we want to see, how does the family seem to function? Does that family seem to be sensitive to the patient or insensitive? Are they able to communicate their needs, their wants, their frustrations? Do key family members have the ability to make effective decisions at all? And do they have any experience to draw from at all? The extent of family disruption depends on the family's level of functioning before the illness happens, before there's a crisis in the family. So in some cases, a major illness will bring a family close together and will have them bond, but in others, even a minor illness can cause a significant amount of strain that needs to be addressed. So how a family functions influences the health of its members, as well as how the individual will react to that illness. Not all families are going to function the same way, nor do all the families have the same structure or style. So getting a sense of where they're at is really important to help them move forward in self-managing. The next area we want to look at is, what is their understanding of what the problem is? Do they think they know what caused the health problem? What do they think the problem does for the patient or to the patient? How severe do they even believe the illness is? What kind of treatment do they think the patient should have? What are some major problems the illness has forced the family to face? And ultimately, what do they fear the most? And they all will have different fears. It's important to identify what the illness means, not only to that individual, but also the whole family as a whole. So asking them what they consider the major problems and how they plan to handle specific situations can help you assess the meaning of that patient's illness into the family. And you may have 3 family members that have completely different ideas of what the major problems are going to be, either short-term or long-term. The family can also individually influence that patient's belief about the severity of the illness. And there are some members that have more of an influence on family members than others. So as an example, if a family member fails to realize why a certain medicine is ordered to treat a specific disease or fail to see the effects of the treatment, then their attitudes might be a direct barrier to that patient complying to what is being addressed. The other area that we need to consider is, what are their teaching needs? Do they know others with the same problem? Do they understand and agree with the treatment plan? Are there any physical or cognitive limitations? So when teaching the patient and family, it's important to identify any learning disabilities, whether they are developmental or cognitive. Dealing with literacy can be a little touchy, but needs to be understood, because sending them home with a bunch of pamphlets and information to read may not be useful at all, because they will just be thrown out. Patient teaching should be conducted with the family present as much as possible. So if the family members will be the primary caregivers, then educational material needs to be written out to meet their unique needs and not just a broad stroke. Most health-related educational materials right now for non-professionals are written just for patients, and they describe what the patients can do to cope with problems, but there's very little material out there for how family members can cope and what they can do to help the patient. So the family caregiver needs to know everything that the patient does, but in addition, they also need guidance in how to support and work with that patient to make the self-management as successful as possible. So as an overview, what kind of information does a family need? They need general information about that health problem. They need to know when and how to get help from the health professionals. They need to know what the family can do on their own to maybe prevent future problems. And they need help in developing how to get home care started. The bottom line, a systematic approach to this patient education requires including family members. Without them, you will not be able to move forward as fast as you would like. And although it's important to start your teaching with what to do, as the family gets more confidence, then we need to teach them the reasons why they're doing specific things so that they'll have a greater sense of efficacy and control over things. Sometimes even sharing case studies of what other families in similar circumstances have done is an excellent teaching strategy. they're often very interested in how caregivers solve their problems, and what they've done, where they've gone, who they have talked to, and therefore they may respond much more positively through that type of learning. We want to move in now, and I want to touch on some of the issues that patient and family deal with, both individually and as a group. So the chart shows the main issues that we look at. We have the patient deals with physical, emotional, financial, relational, and the family emotional, financial, relational, and at some points they could deal with physical illnesses if stress gets to the point where it affects their health. So living with a chronic illness and caring for a person with chronic illness can lead to all of these stressors. The symptoms of this stress may look similar in both the person dealing with the emotion and the caregiver. So now we're going to take a little bit of a closer look at each of these. The first one we're going to look at is emotional. When we see a patient and the family, we understand that patients with chronic conditions often have to adjust to their aspirations, their lifestyle, their employment, and so a lot of them will grieve about their predicament even before adjusting to it. But others have protracted distress, and they may develop depression or anxiety. The person who is ill may feel guilty about the demands that his or her illness makes on the family. He or she might resent the change in the roles and responsibilities caused by the limitations posed by what they have, and she may be upset that she must deal with this threat of her change in autonomy and the need to depend on healthy family members. And at the same time, the caregiver and family member is dealing with their own set of emotions. They will go through a period of grief, anger, and denial about their family members' conditions themselves. They will then feel anxious and nervous about the uncertain and unknown future, what's going to happen. So these pressures altogether can lead to stress, exhaustion, tension within the family relationships. So it's imperative that you're aware of these things and can help support the family and prevent them from becoming overwhelming to everyone. The next aspect that affects families greatly is the financial. So many patients find their financial situations change little since they've become ill, but there are others that the financial pressures can be great. Some may have lost their jobs. They have to change jobs. Others may have had to have some retraining in a new position. And many family members have indicated that they have felt obligated to help support family members, extended family members, financially, even if they themselves are struggling financially, because they then feel that their situation isn't as dire as those that may have a chronic illness. And so the financial upheaval and stress can be great on a family member, both immediate and extended. Relational changes within the family. So we're going to see the changes that we've talked about before, where it will create new obligations, new responsibilities. We're going to have these feelings of powerlessness. Intimacy may change or diminish within partners. There might be a resentment. There'll be lots of fear and anxiety. The relationships might be compromised and strained. And if there are children involved, they're going to be confused, scared, and needing some kind of guidance. So all of these factors are going to unite to produce this potential relationship change for both the ill person and the family. This is the biggest area of stress for both patient and family. And we need to be sure that even if someone is single or struggling alone in their illness, the patient who lives with a family can also feel isolated and not understood. All family members are challenged to live differently then, and some may have to assume additional and new responsibilities. So relationships can also be a great source of support and a great area to go to when having a hard time, but it can also be a source of stress. They will take its toll on people by challenging them at every turn when dealing with illnesses that may also change over time. So family members have a lot to deal with because the person with a chronic illness is dealing with anxiety and depression and anger and irritability and may take it out on close family members. And this can put even more strain on the relationship and having family members feel helpless and like they just want to walk away and give up. So during the various stages and cycles of the illness, families and friends can be profoundly affected emotionally and relationally, and they may end up needing their own support. So they too are trying to adjust to these changes that have occurred and still support the person who has the illness. Suggesting counseling of some sort at this point is extremely important, that they all get their own way and their own method of support for themselves and not feeling like they have to take it all on them, on their own shoulders. So what are some coping strategies to help both the patient but mainly the family? We want to look at counseling and learning how to de-stress and relax, getting them some education, being able to help recognize their limits. Overall, being able to accept the situation for what it is. We need to help them build in fun, change what is normal for them, change their expectations, help them access their supports, and set some goals. So because of the levels and types of stress involved, the impact of chronic illness can extend far beyond the sufferers and their caregivers. Nearly always it affects the household of the person with a chronic condition. And as those household members are affected, then the people who love and care for those people and work for them can also be affected. A recent study of grown children with chronically ill parents revealed that even non-caregiving children showed an increased risk of depression. So in every chronic condition, strong support systems benefit everyone. And because of the relentless demands associated with some chronic illnesses, understanding the positive methods of coping can greatly benefit everyone affected by this condition. So communication and support. There is often a fear and anxiety over the chronicity of changes and the drain, perhaps, to the resources both emotionally, physically, and financially. So there may be resentment. The caregiver may feel alone and isolated, as most of the attention will go to meeting the needs of the chronically ill person. The ability of family and friends to support is directly affected by their ability to deal with that ongoing stress, their flexibility in the face of this uncertainty, and being able to effectively then communicate this. It's important for primary caregivers to seek the support and guidance they need to assist them in their own journey through the chronic illness. It is well known that having a social support network outside of the family benefits all members of the family, both physically and psychologically, and sometimes just knowing that they're available and out there if needed is all they need. So having a list of those supports is crucial. So finally, we want to look at the healthcare team and how it's made up. The family comprises that social context in which illness occurs. So the happiness and the health of each person then depends, to a large extent, on the nature of his or her interaction with those other members of the family unit. Healthcare professionals need to see the family caregiver as a true partner in providing care and to see themselves as health educators whose role is just to teach the families how to solve the problems rather than as the experts who solve these problems for them. So it's important for healthcare professionals also to legitimize that the family caregiver's participation in the team is valid. Some family caregivers are intimidated by health professionals, and they therefore need reassurance that the way in which they manage their patients' care and solve problems are approved by that professional member of the healthcare team. As a whole, we want everybody to feel like they have an equal piece of the puzzle and are contributing and not feeling like they're left out or forgotten. At this time, I want to thank you for listening and participating, and if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
So at this time, it's Danielle speaking. I'm unmuting everybody who's here so that you may ask your questions out loud, or if you prefer, you may also type them in the chat box. So if anybody's got any questions, please let us know. I guess that means there aren't any. Unless there's any other closing comments, did anybody want to just comment on the presentation in general or have a discussion point that they'd like to bring up? Okay, so I guess unless there's further closing comments from Megan or Tina, we would just like to thank you for coming to our webinar, and we hope that you found it interesting. And hopefully you will come to the next one. I'll be sending out information about the following one in a couple of weeks and with the registration link. So thank you, everybody, and have a nice day.
Thank you.